Carry-on luggage on U.S. flights is out of control.
Just my opinion, but in comparison to places like Australia, carry-on luggage on American domestic flights is completely out of control. It seems like everyone is just pushing the limits of is acceptable, and there are some very obvious, that should be checked luggage, bags rolling onto the plane.
This is a massive waste of time. How do people put up with this? I would say it increases boarding time by a good 30% because the bins fill up quickly and people have to play overhead baggage Tetris. Checked bags used to be free, included with the ticket price.
As soon as they became an extra expense, of course this happened. It's my opinion that airlines should either be all-inclusive, or pay for everything separate like Spirit and Frontier, etc.
This middle ground just causes people to bring carry-ons, and planes weren't designed for it.
By making carry-ons free, and checked bags $70, of course this was bound to happen.
It seems like every airline nickel and dimes TF out of passengers these days.
Just give me a straightforward fare that includes a bag and a seat FFS.
Offer one other option with no bag if you must.
The basic economy, premium economy, etc. tiers are starting to become as big of a headache as shopping for health insurance. This is why, despite some recent problems, Southwest is still my favorite airline.
No nickel and diming. 2 free checked bags, free carry-on, and no fees to change your ticket up to like 10 minutes before. You can even cancel your ticket and get your money back as flight credit. Every other airline makes all of this more difficult and they suck for it. It is no coincidence that boarding a SW flight is a total breeze. And #X200B.
Majority of people with a lot of stuff check their bag, and it is never a fight for overhead storage. Unless you are trying to fly with someone and you don't have small children, then it's a clusterfuck trying to find seats next to each other.
In that case, pay the reasonable price for the upgrade to a group boarding, and you can choose any seat on the plane. Aside from the turds who hog multiple seats.
This is exactly right.
People hate on SW, but I don't mind it. And I don't mind as much paying the $20 fee or whatever it is for early automatic check-in to get a better boarding spot. Every business does this these days, the nickel and diming. I'm not saying it's right, not for a second, but there are very few businesses that give a shit about their customers. People demand cheaper and cheaper tickets. Ultra-low-cost airlines weren't even a concept until relatively recently, pushing the race to the bottom even further. Nickel and diming is a direct side effect of air travel getting more accessible. Somebody is always cheaper and more desperate, and the airlines will be glad to take their money for a miserable piecemeal experience instead of flying an empty seat. I have very mixed feelings on it.
If any of the legacy carriers adopted Southwest-style bag and cancellation policies, but kept traditional classes of service and their premium gate slots, I'd switch loyalty from Delta in a heartbeat even at a higher price point. Business travelers are often forced to buy the cheapest fare within their travel time parameters. Putting a small premium on prices to create a more pleasant experience would cause the airline to lose a significant chunk of the lucrative business travel segment. I say this as someone who would gladly pay a premium for a less annoying experience, but who has also wasted not insignificant number of work hours over the years circumventing the idiotic fare price rules my employers imposed to save $50 on a ticket by forcing me to make multi-leg trips on airlines I can't stand. My meetings last week ended at 3:30. I wanted a 6 p.m. flight. The corporate travel tool told me the only flight I was allowed was at 11 p.m. Fine. I will stay another night that costs more than the difference in flight price. Maddening. Most people search by cost and no other things, and then wonder why all airlines just give the worst possible service. It costs money to have bag handlers. Having everyone bring their own smaller bags on board is cheaper, so the ticket is cheaper, and the reason why they pick the ticket is it's cheaper, but then they wonder why it happens. Airlines in general are out of control. I just took a JetBlue flights from SFO to Florida. My personal item was free and they wanted $60 to bring a carry-on. Southwest does this. 2 bags free, up to £50. each, plus 2 carry-on.
No extra fees except you give up the option for assigned seating. Their fees come into play for better seating choice. If you're not picky and just want to get from point A to point B, I would fi this route. Yay, this all started when the government stopped subsidizing airlines. It's not really a surprise when an average ticket is like $120 but airplanes cost $120. I'm genuinely at a loss for words at this comment.
Governments continue to provide massive subsidies to airlines. It is an industry that refuses to innovate, and has not generally been profitable on a ticket sales basis for at least a decade if not more.
Airlines operate like banks in the U.S. domestic market these days.
Besides the fact that your numbers are wildly inaccurate, let's just assume that a plane costs 120 meters and a ticket costs $120.
If there's 200 tickets per flight, that would take 5,000 flights to pay of the cost of the plane excluding fuel, maintenance, staffing, and other associated costs. If you genuinely believe that airlines are operating like that, then I have a bridge to sell you. Blame Frank Lorenzo. The carry-on bag size used to be larger too. Now my bag barely fits, though it's the same one I've used for years. Plus, they're squeezing each and every inch of the plane with more seats, which means more passengers and more carry-on bags. Oh, I've had first-hand experience with this.
There was an international flight I took United every year to travel to my home country.
The seat configuration were 3-3-3.
Then one day it became 3-4-3.
Just more crammed seats. And you still have only 3 divisions to keep your under-seat personal item. Like literally there's 4 people sitting and there are 3 divisions to put your feet. I suspect the 3-3-3 plane was a 787, or similar Airbus, and the 3-4-3 was a 777, which has a wider fuselage and can accommodate the extra seat. I am not trying to attack you, but the reason you picked that ticket was probably because it was the cheapest, and that is why. If people cared about the number of seats across, or the rules on checked bags, then they would actually look at the details and pay more for those tickets, but they don't. They pick the cheapest. Until people stop that, it's going to be a race to the bottom in terms of service. I feel like there are so few choices for most people needing to get between 2 places on a certain date, and things like non-stop versus layover need to be weighed. The decision is already made before you can start trying to compare seating. Exactly. You look at location, then time, then layover, then price. The seating is something you discover during checkout. I just always pay extra. For the legroom.
Doesn't make sense. T9 be uncomfortable.
Poor folk should take the bus. If there were a bus across the Atlantic Ocean, I'm sure many people would take it. I mean, yeah. I was a student then. Now I know better and also have a job, so I can pick better flights and seats.
Which plane?
I'm 5 feet tall and thin, yet barely fit into airline seats.
Can't imagine how an average-sized or tall, heavy person manages. The seats obnoxiously crammed together.
I fly with my kids regularly to visit family. We all pack in one checked bag and bring small knapsacks on the plane. Not worth the hassle anymore. I'm 5 feet 10 and my husband is 6 feet 1, and we are both thin and have smaller to AVG size frames.
Last time we flew with an extra room seat, which we always upgrade to, my husband was crawling out of his skin by the time we landed. It was so uncomfortable.
We upgraded on the return flight to first class and it was so immeasurably better, it was amazing. We travel quite a bit less now. There is no way we can do over maybe a 3 to 4 hour flight without being in business or first class, so much more $. I used to travel a lot for work and hate carry-ons and never do it anymore. It is a huge waste of time and a hassle. Same. And United Airlines is the worst.
My knees, 5 feet 8, hit the seat in front of me, and not being able to reach down for anything without hitting my forehead on the seat in front of me is so freaking claustrophobic.
It's like, no wonder people lose their shit on flights.
JetBlue and Alaska are much kinder. JetBlue and Alaska are my 2 favorites as well.
I flew Frontier when they were decent, then once after, and the tiny metal seats were horrible.
Can't do it. Yeah. Flying is such a stressful SS anymore, it's no wonder people have meltdowns.
It's also always encouraging to read about uncontrollable diarrhea flights. And people are getting fatter, which makes for some cozy seating. Hey, now I've been fat for a very long time. No worries, just stating an interesting fact. I only wish airline seats were getting wider and increasing legroom instead of going the opposite. Now automobiles are deferentially following the trend of their buyers. People are fat because they drive everywhere. And Leon is getting Leargear.
It depends on the plane.
The newer ones have larger spaces for bags than ever. I'm referring to the sizing guide from the airline, not the space availability.
Yeah, I have a small suitcase that used to be the exact max carry-on size for all the European low-cost airlines.
It was perfect because I could travel up to 2 weeks using the small suitcase. Now the free carry-on bag has to fit under the seat. Greater than now the free carry-on bag has to fit under the seat. So the obvious solution is to lobby the airlines to raise seat heights.
That's definitely incorrect.
Newer planes have significantly increased the size of overhead bins. Also, we all travel with a lot more crap these days. I'm traveling with less than ever, TBH.
Speak for yourself? It's been the same clothes and laptop for me for decades.
Speak for yourself. I bring much more stuff with me these days. Try being part of the solution.
The original justification for charging for checked baggage was increased gas prices. In the late 2000s, https://www.farecompare.com/travel-advice/airline-fees-bags-history/closing parenthesis 2. But when gas prices came down, the fees never went away.
In addition to this, airlines used to be much less efficient with checked bags IMEI. It used to take forever to get your bags off the carousel, and lost luggage wasn't infrequent. This has since gotten better, but I'd still rather have eyes on my luggage at all times. AirTag and Relax has been my more recent approach. If I'm traveling for work, I check a bag because it's less stress and hassle, and work is paying for the $30. Consistently my bags are either already out on the carousel or it's less than 5 minutes wait for them.
Add to that, airport traffic flow is such that baggage claims are typically not out of the way to ground transportation, so it's really no inconvenience.
Checked bags are being lost more than ever. I've had it ruin multiple trips.
That hasn't been my experience, and I travel a decent amount for work, though nothing like pre-COVID times where I had status on multiple carriers, all with short-haul trips. Many short-haul trips. But, even still, that's why AirTags help.
You can at least say, authoritatively, where your bag is, isn't. E.g., it didn't mistakenly go to Austin when you were headed to Boston.
Having your name and contact number in multiple places can help as well. Plus make sure you pull all the old tags and barcodes off your bag after every trip.
I've flown 10 times in the past 4 years, and half of them my bags were delayed by half a day to ending up back home airport at return.
Delta, United, Southwest. My trip to Europe where it's a different city a day for 2 weeks, I can't afford that chance.
What airports? Birmingham, Alabama, Hartford, Connecticut, Midland, TX, Nashville, Tennessee, Greensboro, North Carolina. Oof, currently en route to Hartford with a very important checked bag for work, and this is making me worry.
Originating from the same place each time?
Nope. I've moved around past few years between NC, TN, and AL. Edit to add that family medical emergencies and taking care of my dad has made this a thing. Airlines pay fewer taxes on fees rather than base fares. That's why budget airlines with ridiculously low fares, under $50, and high fees, seat plus luggage $100.
Greater than it used to take forever to get your bags off the carousel, and lost luggage wasn't infrequent.
It still takes forever in my experience, surely it varies a lot by airport. I avoid checking luggage even when free due to status or some credit card. I generally hate having to wait 20 minutes plus for luggage, with all the fucking idiots doing their best to stand as close to the carousel as possible.
Definitely varies.
The worst I deal with is Vancouver when you're taking a flight from the US.
I've had to wait upwards of an hour after customs once, and always 15 to 20 minutes minimum. Other places I've been to recently: Seattle, O'Hare, MSP.
Bag beats me or short wait, domestic or international. I will agree with the AirTag thing though, has been really nice to chill on the bench until I know it's coming instead of being stuck in the crowd around the carousel.
Don't forget the monopolization. https://www.seattletime.com/life/travel/how-airline-mergers-hurt-travelers-and-dash-how-you-can-fight them/closing parenthesis and eliminating competition. With basic economy being the price being shown in most flight search engines, all companies are now Spirit, Frontier.
I can't remember when was the last time a major company like United or American let me choose my seat.
But what they didn't adopt was the aggressive policing.
Spirit will fuck you up if your carry-on is an inch too long. On United Basic Economy you can bring a too big carry-on and tie a couple of shopping bags to it and you'll be ignored. I disagree. Australia has free carry-on and checked for full-service airlines, and free carry-on and pay to check on budget airlines.
The difference is that in Australia and Europe, your carry-on size is smaller than the US and their IDS weight limit, so more bags are checked.
Also, Spirit and Frontier charging more for carry-on than for checked it completely wild. It would be smart if they charged for carry-on and nothing for checked for safety reasons.
NASA found through extensive flight crash safety testing that one of the most likely causes of death in a modern plane crash is from carry-on luggage falling on heads, which can either kill you itself or make it impossible to escape quickly.
Sobering stuff.
Especially when people overload carry-ons without anyone weighing them, which as you pointed out is the norm in the US.
Meanwhile, they're quite strict about the weight of checked luggage.
The airline industry is one that particularly depends on safety, but the cheaper, free carry-on thing is encouraging less safety. Greater than also Spirit and Frontier charging more for carry-on than for checked it completely wild.
That makes sense.
ULCCs, LCCs have fewer planes and tighter turnaround times than major, legacy carriers, so the fewer carry-ons passengers have to take time to stuff into the overheads, the quicker the boarding time, which is more important when you don't have much time at the gate. No, it's done in the US because in the US people prefer traveling carry-on only, so they know they can make more money from it. I don't know why anyone would prefer this.
People have no idea what they want.
Why are you asking airlines to be bigger Nazis about your experience or to charge you for the size of your carry-on?
They nickel and dime you enough as it is.
Because having a carry-on is just better. You have your stuff, so no need to wait in line at check-in, wait in line after you get off the plane to get your bags, and they can't lose them.
Not having luggage for 7 days one trip is enough to say never again.
One Frontier charged nearly the same for carry-on as checked. Boarding became more pleasant with relatively few carry-ons. Here in Canada, one of the low-cost airlines actually charges less for a checked bag, with the same results.
Nickel and diming the passengers makes the boarding and deplane process take a lot longer and more miserable than it has to. Between the rush to find overhead space for carry-ons and being pushed to bring your own meals, it makes you wonder if these moves are actually costing the airlines more. So you want them to nickel and dime you even harder by charging for, further limiting your carry-on size? They got it all twisted.
Carry-on bags should be $70 and checked baggage should be free.
Never going to happen. 1. You are responsible for getting your cabin luggage on and off the plane.
Checked luggage requires the company to get someone to do that for you, which costs them more on ground crew and turnaround time.
2.
If a majority of people do not check bags, then they don't need so many people, totems at the check-in counters.
Less cost. 3.
If absolutely anything happens to your checked bags, damage, loss, theft, etc., the airline incurs costs to a. process your case, and b. refund your losses, whereas if you damage your carry-ons in the process of handling them, that's on you. I'm not happy about any of this, mind you, but there is a negative economic incentive for the airlines to change in this matter. Don't forget the other dirty secret of checked luggage. The airlines make more money carrying cargo than passenger bags. These policies of free carry-on and checked bag for a fee encourage more room for highly profitable air freight.
Very good point.
That seems like a great solution, or it would be if they didn't lost bags so darn often. These days, I feel I need to have at least a change of clothes and pair of shoes in my carry-on just in case my bag doesn't make it.
Waiting for your bag to get to you when you get home is one thing.
When you're heading out on a trip where you'll be changing location a lot, it's a disaster if your bag is delayed.
Most airlines will check in your carry-on for free.
I'll usually take advantage of this if I'm on a direct flight, but it sucks when I have a long layover where I might like to access items and my bag only has the option of being checked through to the final destination.
I love it whenever planes, pink tag, bridge check bags. They ride underneath, but I can just pick them up on the jet bridge after landing. Charging more for carry-ons is the one thing that Spirit is doing right. I've always also thought it would be good if people were able, or better, required, to reserve overhead space in a specific bin in advance. The number of bags that wouldn't fit in a carry-on space reserved and the percentage of people who have no idea their bags are too big or don't currently care is too high. Shush. Don't give the airlines any more ways to charge a fee. I honestly think it should go the opposite. Checked bags should be free and carry-ons should be charged a premium. Carrying on is far more convenient, and if it weren't free, you would pretty much guarantee you'd get a space if you paid for it. Remember when they had free and delicious meals on domestic flights before 9/11? Good times. They should literally switch this model, pay to carry on and free check. The latest I saw was $50 for a checked bag and $60 for a carry-on. Rolling on the floor laughing. I was so stoked that my recent Air NZ flight to Auckland from LAX, and from AKL to SID, had free Wi-Fi the entire flight, included checked bags in fare, and even let you get snacks or water whenever in the back. I always thought it should have been the opposite. It was a race to be listed as the cheapest on websites. Those same people sorting by price will still fly Spirit, etc., so the major airlines need to pivot. Yet I fly SW, and the amount of people bringing bags on board when they are literally free. That stigma of lost bags is still so real. Airlines should just enforce checks like many budget airlines. Easy peasy. It's also beneficial to the airlines to have more carry-on bags, as they count as weighing nothing when it comes to how weight and balance is calculated. Too many checked bags, which count as weight, can bump flights up close to their limits. Then they'd have to remove bags, people, or fuel. Edit. Never mind, I'm an idiot, and so is everyone that upvoted me. You, Soul Scratcha, is absolutely correct. You can read the FAA documents yourself. https://www.fa.gov/document-library/media/advisory_circular/ac_120-27f.pdf. That's how I've understood it at every airline I've ever flown for, so if you work in load planning or something, I'd love to be corrected on it. Here's how I understand it. Carry-on baggage weight falls under the average assumed weight, again, this includes assumed carry-on bag weight of the passenger, which for an adult male is 190 pounds in the summer and 195 pounds in the winter to account for seasonally appropriate clothing. This is what an adult male weighs for load planning, whether a carry-on bag is with that passenger or not. Now checked bags are weighed and counted and individually add to the calculated gross weight of the airplane. If you had, say, 50 checked bags that weigh 50 pounds each, that's 2,500 pounds of bags. If you remove one of those bags and put it in the cabin, that 50 pounds gets rolled into the passenger average weights and effectively disappears. You are 50 pounds lighter on paper. Obviously the airplane weighs the same, but as far as weight and balance calculations go, you now weigh 50 pounds less. On paper for legal weight and balance planning, some are weights. If you have 100 adult males with 100 carry-on bags, that weighs 19,000 pounds. If you have 100 adult males with 0 carry-on bags, that weighs 19,000 pounds. If you have 100 adult males with 150 pounds checked bags, that weighs 19,000 plus 5,000 equals 24,000 pounds. I'm not saying it's not ridiculous, but that's how it is.
Have you ever had your carry-on weighed or counted beyond just the visual look to make sure you don't exceed the 2 carry-on bag limit? These assumed weights are also the result of FAA surveys of passengers and their carry-on bags.
Airlines can either use assumed weights or weigh each passenger and their bags individually, every flight.
Guess what airlines choose to do?
You're spot on.
People down voting have no clue how most airlines calculate weights. This makes a lot of sense, and until someone refutes it with evidence, I am holding it as true because I can't find anything online to counter it.
I am a lowly corporal, and with B is everything in the bug smashers I fly. I will defer to your knowledge of the industry if you are saying you are ATP. I'm not disputing the FAR. I just find it hard to believe an airline would actively look to fudge the with B calculations and have inaccurate data for that purpose.
It's not so much active fudging than it is getting the W and B reasonably accurate, without having to individually weigh each passenger every time. But it is good to keep in mind if you're ever at a 121 regional, because you absolutely will be in a situation where you're legally overweight in your clapped out RJ due to surprise snowstorms, an addition of alternate fuel or whatever, and moving 1 or 2 checked bags to the cabin will now make you legal to depart and make it back to den before Wendy's closes. Whether or not that course of action is prudent would be up to you as a flight crew. Also, I made up that last part. I don't think den has a Wendy's. That makes a whole lot of sense.
Thanks for taking the time to explain that to a rude noob like myself.
Love that you're getting hammered, but nobody has countered your take.
Sounds feasible to me from the way we work some load calcs in engineering.
It's crazy you're getting downvoted because this is exactly how calculations are made.
These people never worked in aviation, and it shows.
Yeah, I've had bags moved into the cabin a number of times to get the flight out without leaving anyone behind. But hey, what do I know? It's not an intuitive thing, I suppose, but the alternatives to get more accurate numbers would be insanely time-consuming, and thus this loophole exists. Yes, because massive carry-on bags are weightless and don't affect the plane's maximum capacity or fuel consumption.
On paper they do not. You can refer to my explanation above. Fortunately, I'm not flying in a paper airplane. No, but in the US you're flying in an airplane that does not count or weigh carry-on bags. Or they could work with TSA to actually enforce bag number and size limits. TSA currently DGAFF how many bags or how big they are that you being, as long as they fit through their machines. A lot of people just bring simply too much shit with them everywhere. Giving a free bag won't solve that issue. They'll take the free bag and use it as an excuse to just being more. It is a textbook example of induced demand, but the solution is pretty simple. Actually enforce the rules that already exist. It's not the sauce job to enforce the airline's baggage policies? If that is a question, the answer is no. The TSA job is to enforce the Travel and Security Administration policies, law. The airlines abide to those rules though. You haven't a clue what you're talking about. TSA don't enforce airlines' baggage policies, so the only thing they should care about is if it fits in their scanners or not. Plus at my Canadian airport, it can take upwards of 2 hours to get your luggage back at the end of the flight. I came back from LA and was in the airport for almost 3 hours after with luggage and customs. When I do carry-on only, 40 minutes tops. I think more of the issue is fear of lost bags. That's certainly why I always chose to go carry-on only. The airlines created this problem and refused to own up to it. I blame Buttigieg or whatever the hell his name is. Not to mention the risk of losing or delaying your checked luggage,
which seems to have started to occur at an alarming regularity in recent years. This is 100% because airlines have chosen to monetize checked luggage.
It's because they decided to turn their passengers into their baggage handlers.
I prefer not checking a bag on a trip out.
I can literally walk out of the airport and start exploring rather than waiting at the baggage claim. On the trip back, I usually check a bag as I have souvenirs, some local beer, etc.
How do you check a bag on your way back? Do you buy a bag at your destination?
I've done this numerous times. Went to Morocco on Ryanair. Flew down with the tiny cabin bag.
Knew I would be purchasing a rug, so got the checked bag coming back.
I found a cheap duffel bag at a market and brought back the rug. Done the same in SE Asia when I know I will come back with stuff. I do this when I visit my hometown. I always want to bring back a bunch of food and snacks.
My strategy is to pop into a thrift store and pick up a large, somewhat light suitcase for about $10, and then when I get back to my home I donate that bag.
Although, the last time I went home a friends let me borrow a lightweight duffel bag that folded down to nothing and that worked great. Although I had to be really strategic about where I put the crushables like cookies, and I wrapped a bottle of liquor in a Ziploc bag and padded it with a bunch of clothes in the very center of the bag. In the end it wasn't any worse than using a suitcase and it was free. I have a carry-on sized duffel bag that folds into a small pouch. When I think I'll be shopping I pack that and use it as my carry-on for the trip home and check my suitcase, since my suitcase is hardier.
It was cheap and far less wasteful than buying new bags. I'll sometimes travel with an empty duffel bag inside my carry-on suitcase, then fill the suitcase with souvenirs and as much of my original luggage as possible before checking it and carrying on the duffel for the trip home.
Different person, but we bring a packable duffel.
Takes up very little space in a backpack.
On the way home, it gets filled with all the dirty clothes and squishy stuff, fragile, souvenirs in our carry-ons. This is a great idea. I legitimately never thought about doing that. The most I've waited in the past 4 years has been 5 to 10 minutes. Usually my bag is out before I even arrive at the carousel. If it's international, no way I'm beating the bag with passport control in the way. Which domestic American airport do you just walk outside and start exploring? They're all in the middle of nowhere compared to the city they serve. DCA is 4 stops from the National Mall on Metro. Fair point, but that airport is fairly small.
Unless someone is flying first class, by the time they deplane their bags will be on the carousel.
Let's remember the op. I'm remembering you saying all the airports were in the middle of nowhere.
Any other examples for a major city?
I already mentioned LAX.
DC is also tiny in general.
20 million US visitors, 1 million international visitors to a 6 million person metro area. Yes, tiny. DC proper is less than 1 million people. I went to college there and still visit when I can. I know it's Super Bowl Sunday, but you don't need to keep moving the goalposts.
Shit. The metro doesn't even cover parts of DC.
Is there a stop in G-Town yet? No. Georgetown sucks, fuck 'em.
There is a metro stop at Dulles now.
A 6-minute walk from the airport. Of course the city is less than 1 million people, but DC and the border counties, which are all extensions of DC, are 3 million plus in population.
That said, Logan, Loves Field, even O'Hare are incredibly public transit friendly.
I can walk off a plane at O'Hare and be having a drink in the Loop in about an hour. In Boston it's about 30 minutes. Lol, have a good day. Op said, walking out of the airport and immediately start exploring.
Yes, the L can get you to the Loop in. Checks notes. An hour.
San is literally downtown right on the harbor. Las Vegas and Phoenix are within 10 minutes of the Strip, downtown. Both are easy to walk out and grab a taxi straight there. I suppose you aren't in an urban area on foot immediately as you are asking, but they are both very conveniently located. I was actually going to edit and say LAX is kinda near stuff, but with traffic it takes forever to get anywhere worth checking out as a tourist. I drive to Vegas and have no plan to ever visit Phoenix again.
That city sucks with the heat and overall vibe.
And I live in SoCal, so yay urban. I fly into John Wayne though, and there is nothing walkable about Orange County.
Edit. Since the downvotes, I live in Long Beach and my neighborhood is pretty much equidistant from John Wayne and LAX.
If United flew to LBC, I would fly there. I've never waited more than 10 minutes after deplaning to get my checked bag at SNA.
LAX is pretty quick with bags also. Phoenix weather is some of the nicest in the country December through February.
If you are seeking a resort pool, then maybe add in March and April.
Outside of that, it is miserable. The downtown area itself has improved in the last 10 years, but still lags pretty much every other city of its size. It suffers from being a newer city than pretty much all of them.
Its historic neighborhood is from the 1940s. So you have pockets of neighborhood areas that are great, but no central nexus to head for. I mean, I don't think they meant they literally walk outside the terminal and then into a museum or whatever. The nature of the space required for an airport means it's generally not going to be right in the middle of the city, but there's plenty of airports that are a 15-ish minute drive, Uber, from the city center.
That's hardly middle of nowhere.
It's at least partially because they lose your checked luggage half the time. Exactly. This a combination of airlines charging for checked luggage and then losing the damned luggage. I check bags about a dozen times a year.
The bags are delayed less than once a year and show up 24 to 48 hours later.
I've never had a bag actually lost, where I never got it back, and I've checked bags probably 300 times in the last 25 years.
Edit. Those bags are also delivered to my doorstep. I've never had to go back to an airport to get it.
1/12 odds of a delay is pretty bad.
It's probably less often than that, I don't track it. Definitely not more. I didn't experience any delays in 2023. December 2022 I flew fra LHRC.
My checked bag was delivered 2 weeks after my arrival. My return flight was a week later.
This time, I put an AirTag in the bag.
It was lost again and delivered to me 72 hours later.
Those were my only flights over a 12-month period.
Delayed isn't lost.
Lost is, never seen again.
Edit.
If an airline delivers a bag to where I am within a day-ish of travel, calling that lost is some real Karen shit. Expecting the world to operate perfectly 100% of the time shows that people are spoiled and soft.
Delayed is still absolutely unacceptable if you're going to charge me for luggage. Honestly, at an airport like CLT or JFK where there's hundreds of flights, I'm amazed that any bags actually get onto another plane within an hour, and they generally do. Whether you pay or not doesn't change the sheer complexity of all that movement. If you wanted to pay for white glove transfer of your bag to make sure it never got lost, it will cost as much as a flight. Fair enough.
Though not much of a consolation when your stuff isn't where you need it, when you need it.
For what it's worth, it looks like you probably flew Lufthansa.
They're notoriously the worst when it comes to luggage, no other airline comes close.
Nope, it was BA, but the connection in LHR was missed and they switched me onto an AA flight to Seattle. The bag was in LHR for a week.
Returning, in C, the BA plane was declared unfit to fly 3 hours after the scheduled departure and they rebooked me onto, again, an AA flight the next day and required all passengers to recollect their checked bags in C and recheck them on their alternate flights the next day.
Only problem was they weren't able to deliver my checked bag, which, despite waiting 3 hours, was, according to Apple's Find My app, still on the tarmac by the gate, where it remained even as my off flight departed the next morning. Also, BA in both cases gave me a paper slip with the number of a customer service hotline in NY State that was never actually staffed. I called it numerous times over a 3-week period at all hours of the day. Their online tracing website was faulty and wouldn't save my information most of the time. Only consolation was that I was eventually successful in getting them to refund me for $600 in expenses. Only had to wait about 3 months. Plus UK passenger rights compensation for the 13-hour late arrival on the return leg.
though the latter took 9 months, multiple certified letters and a threat of legal action.
They're a horrible outfit.
You realize something can be lost and then found again, right? You realize that the airlines have tracking numbers and know where the bag is, right?
Honestly, lost is generous to the airline then. If they have a tracking number but still can't deliver the bag in less than 2 weeks, that's abhorrent.
2 weeks is definitely abhorrent and unusual. Most of the time people on our travel are call them lost when they're delayed a day. Personally, I've never had a delay of longer than a day or two and always had it delivered to my door, so I haven't experienced harm worth throwing a tantrum over.
I just make sure I have a change of clothes in my carry-on if I am checking bags. This is doing more travel in a year than most people on this sub do in a decade.
Neither 2 weeks nor 72 hours are within a day-ish of travel, and should not expected for a service that costs extra. If you're traveling for a short trip, that's a major issue.
I've had it happen multiple times and refuse to check luggage anymore. Carry-on is a simple solution. Why on earth would someone check a bag for a short trip? That's just self-created hardship at that point.
Even for a long trip, if someone has put something they need right away in their checked bag, that's their own poor decision-making.
I check often but always have what I need for the first day in my carry-on.
It sucks that it happens, but people should travel smart rather than expect perfection and melt down when there's a bump.
What airline? BA. See further down in the thread for the full story.
And that's acceptable? It is what it is. I'd rather work around it than whine about something that will remain imperfect.
Those are shit odds, especially for traveling internationally. Yes, but they are what they are. I plan accordingly and don't put anything critical in a checked bag.
At some point, people just need to realize they have to account for shit happening and have a little resilience.
I've traveled a lot for work and personal, have crossed the Atlantic hundreds of times.
The only reliable constant is that nothing works 100% of the time, and you need to have a realistic view of it and make the right adjustments.
If you're checking bags,
you need to get to the airport early. Make sure your connections are no tighter than 90 minutes.
Try to fly direct if possible. Put what you need for the first 2 days in your carry-on.
Use a credit card with lost luggage protection. If someone doesn't follow those steps and checked bags ruin their trip, that's self-created stress. If they do still have problems, then they got the really shit end of the stick, and that's what the last item is for. My maid of honor dress and all my wedding stuff didn't make the flight when I flew for my best friend's wedding.
I don't check bags anymore. Never check anything that absolutely has to get to the destination with you. I do check bags but always have at least a change of clothes in my carry-on and never put anything in the hold that is going to screw me over if it takes an extra couple days.
Accept a delay when you are on the trip fucks up part of the trip, whereas having it on the way home is NBD. It's not hard to build resilience into your packing, as well as avoid short connections if you're checking.
If I'm checking a bag, it's because I'm going with my whole family, for more than a week at least. So I bring a carry-on with what I know we will need for the first few days, and check the remainder knowing that it's not going to hurt me to wait a couple of days if something happens. I also use a credit card that includes a delayed baggage reimbursement in case we need to buy anything. Nobody should ever put something in a checked bag that they will need urgently on arrival. That's entirely self-created stress. This is true, but what seems obvious to us as people who travel is less obvious to the person who goes on one flight every 3 years. Unfortunately, those are the people that always seem to get bit. They book the cheap flight with a 40-minute connection, check everything except a book, and then show up bitching about horrible airlines because the bag got to their hotel 8 hours after they did. People need to learn that shit goes wrong when you travel, build that into your planning and it won't derail you. And I do check more often going home than on departure. Probably twice as much, for the reason you indicated. And also from breaking my luggage. I'm 2 for 2 on broken zippers with TSA locks and broken handles on checking in luggage. Travel Pro and Samsonite brands. Oof yeah, In the cycling community you hear horror stories all the time of bikes getting broken in half in spite of being in hard cases.
Yeah, I'm a nut about trying to travel with only carry-on. Years ago I lived in another country for a bit, so I had packed pretty much all my clothes and other essentials into a checked bag.
Then the airline lost my bag for 3 months. Even though they paid for me to replace some items in the meantime, it was such a pain in the ass. I will now always be packing as much carry-on as I'm allowed.
May the folks who judge me lose their luggage for 3 months. Flown my whole life, been diamond for years now. Literally never have had this happen on all the flights I've taken.
And I've been on maybe a dozen flights in my life and have had it happen. Person shrugging. Not sure why people think their anecdotes are the end-all truth of the matter.
Thus why you stating it happens half the time due to your obviously huge number of flights required a response that your experiences don't speak for everyone's.
Man facepalming. Also, it was an obvious hyperbole. I must be an idiot because at no point in this article does it ever mention Delta. Weird. If you've connected through Heathrow you'd probably understand why they lose so many bags there though. No one ever mentioned Delta at any point. Not sure why you expected the article to?
The thread is about US travel luggage issues and they're its largest carrier. You're posting about England, EU baggage stats, so I'm not sure what to tell you other than to gain knowledge through use of the internet in different ways than you are currently doing.
I'm not stating that based on my personal experience, I'm stating it based on media coverage and statistics. The problem has been exponentially worse since airlines laid off swaths of staff during the pandemic.
https://www.google.com/earl?sa=t and source=web and rct=j and op =89978449 and earl=https://www.bbc.com/news/business-664382234.amp and ved=2 ahukwi 9 mfjj shaksvof thop faha pcq fnishbikbq and usk=aovau 27_sagajkyo 5 gqnilta ek 3.
95% the cost of checking. But also 5% is everyone now believes that they should only do carry-on because so many experienced travelers brag about it.
But they don't realize there is a difference between someone who travels all the time for business who packs light and needs to be at a meeting an hour after landing, or the lady with wanderlust who is hopping on a train.
And them, the family of 4 with toddlers who are going to get into an SUV and stay a week at grandma's oversized suburban house. Or the traveler who flies once every 5 years and is convinced that no other state, country has basics like toilet paper, so they're bringing 2x what they'd need at home with them just in case. It's still a thing on Southwest with 2 free checked bags. It's more that checking a bag is a hassle.
It requires you get to the airport earlier, you need to wait for you bags after, and there's always a chance you bags weren't on the flight with you in the first place.
It's still a thing on Southwest with 2 free bags. Checking a bag is a waste of time and there's always a small chance your baggage isn't on the flight with you with. True.
But even on WN with 2 free bags, not everyone checks bags.
I'd prefer to never check bags personally, but sometimes I have things that can't go carry on. Also, they want to run out of overhead space to incentivize people to pay for earlier boarding groups to ensure they get overhead baggage space.
If you and I have a travel party of 4, yours has 2 checked bags each at max weight and mine has 1 bag each not full, how do they account for the weight and fuel?
Do I have to pay more cause you're bringing more? Feels like you're being nickel and domed, but it's the most fair way. They accounted for weight and full just fine before they started charging baggage fees. In defense of carry-ons, the airline can't lose them, the baggage handlers can't steal your valuables out of them, and you don't have to wait for 30 minutes to retrieve it when you land. And not to mention the whole process to drop off checked luggage.
Being in that checked bag line waiting on all the people who have apparently never checked a bag in their life.
It's absolutely goddamn insane. Although there also needs to be I just need to check this bag and have no other questions, issues, speed line, and then I have an issue line.
Because I shouldn't have to wait behind someone who needs to adjust their entire itinerary at the counter while I just want to toss my bag to them and have them tag it.
Not every airport has curbside luggage check anymore, unfortunately.
Agree, especially since now a lot of airlines have digital bag check where we can just print our sticker at the kiosk and hand it off.
I travel all the time, please let me bypass these people.
In Dublin, you would get the tag yourself at a kiosk, put it on, and the flight people just checked the weight and it was good to go within a minute. In the rare event that I check a bag, I'm generally overly early and don't sweat the lines. However, the bag pickup lines are rough, as everyone crowds around the exit of the conveyor system.
Like, I don't have a problem waiting through when I see my bag, but often I can't even see it.
The bottleneck is already the bags and the speed at which they come out, but now it's compounded by this behavior. If everyone stood back like even just 10 feet, the entire crowd would be able to see, and the time it takes to step forward those few steps isn't going to make or break anything.
You'd think nobody got no damn sense anymore for how long those lines be.
Yeah. I hate checking luggage because of picking it up later. There is nothing better than zipping right off the plane and out of the airport.
Or even better, not checking a bag when flying internationally and getting to the front of the immigration customs line ahead of the rest of the plane.